Hey folks, before we get started, I need to announce a couple of things. First off, I'm very sad to say that our artist, Allison, has decided to step down and leave the show, at least for now. We've all been trying to figure out how to juggle schedules and workloads these past months, but the truth is, with her new job, it was just too much work. Sometimes real life just has to take priority, you know? We hate seeing her go, but we're really excited for her and wish her the best of luck. Maybe someday her workload will even out and she'll be able to jump back in. Either way, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we are grateful for everything. Which brings me to a happier announcement. We have a new member on the team. Scott DeWitt will be joining Lily as our new official artist, so make him feel welcome. Alright, that's enough news. Let's talk about a video game or something. Too rarely when playing games do we ask the question, why? Why are we doing the things that we do? What makes us want to play this part of the game? Not on some large philosophical level, not asking some big question about why we play, though that could be a great topic for an episode too, but rather in the specific. Why am I bashing this monster right now? Why do I care to watch this cutscene? It's one of the most important questions we can ask, both as players and as designers, yet it's very often overlooked. So, though we've talked about it a little bit here and there in other episodes, we thought we'd explore this in a bit more depth. Thus, today we are going to talk about intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. Usually these terms are applied to a game as a whole. Intrinsic rewards are rewards within the game. New challenges, new levels, more story, etc. And extrinsic rewards are rewards that exist outside the game itself, like money in poker, or playing DDR to lose weight. But this is too broad a view of the concept. We need to look at something more specific and far more important. We need to look at each moment of play. It's an interesting question when playing a game to ask at any given moment, am I doing the activity I'm doing for the activity itself, or am I doing it for some other reason? For example, for me, I played through the fights in Final Fantasy VII in order to get access to more of the story. The activity of actually doing the fights themselves wasn't all that engaging. It wasn't what I was playing them for. Rather, I was wading through them because I had to in order to get something else I wanted. Another good example of this is World of Warcraft. In WoW, I'd been conditioned to want certain pieces of gear, so I would grind solely to get that gear. But the problem was just that. I was grinding to get gear, not for the joy of grinding itself. If, instead of looking at games as a whole and asking whether their rewards are extrinsic or intrinsic, we look at each element of play and ask this, the question becomes so much more enlightening. In the preceding examples, the rewards are all extrinsic. If I look at grinding in WoW or combat in Final Fantasy VII in isolation, if I strip away all the other elements of those games, I see that they're not that rewarding in and of themselves, that the only reason we do them is for the externalities. Whereas if I look at something like combat in Bayonetta, puzzles in Professor Layton, or jumping across platforms in a Mario game, heck, even if we look at experiencing the narrative in a good Final Fantasy, or making a really meaningful dialogue choice in Mass Effect or The Witcher or Walking Dead, these are activities that we do for themselves. Their rewards are self-contained, intrinsic to the activity we're doing. As designers, we should always be asking this question, because optimal game design means having every activity be meaningful in and of itself, having each part of your game being engaging rather than simply being a gating mechanism to keep the player from too quickly consuming the reward they really want. And this isn't always possible. Optimal game design isn't real-world game design, but we should always be shooting for it, and we should always be conscious of it. As players, I think it's a worthwhile consideration as well. Upon thinking about it, I realized how many levels I've beaten, how many monsters I've slain, how many treasures I've collected that I just wasn't really interested in, that were merely stepping stones to something else in the game that I wanted. And of late, it's helped me to put down games that I wasn't actually that interested in. It's helped me to say, no, actually, this isn't fair. I'm not going through 20 hours of doing an activity I'm not really interested in, so you can drip feed me the tiny piece I actually want. Which has led me to having a much more satisfying experience with games in general. It's allowed me in my limited gaming time to really play the things that I find a joy to play. And that's not to say that those tiny drip-fed things aren't sometimes worth it. There are many RPGs where the extrinsic motivation of the characters and the world were more than worth the slog through the parts I didn't find inherently engaging, like in Persona 4, for example. But just thinking about games this way has helped me to make that assessment, to better choose when those extrinsic elements are worth it, and not invest time in a game I'm not 100% engaged by when there are so many other amazing games out there to play. So look at each part of a game in isolation. Ask yourself, is this engaging by itself? Am I playing through it for something outside of the actions I'm currently taking? And if not, ponder how these sections might be made engaging. Is there anything inherent in the rest of the experience that would be lessened by making any individual component worth doing in and of itself? Because there almost never is. For example, let's take the Kingdom Hearts series and side-by-side it with Final Fantasy. In Kingdom Hearts, I love the world. I love the characters and the story when it's not being completely stupid. And I also find myself wanting to play the combat. Sometimes I go fight things in that game just for the fun of fighting them. They managed to make the engagement in combat intrinsic without taking away from any of the other parts of the game. In an ideal world, every part of every game you play would be intrinsically engaging. That will never happen, but we should be aware of it when it falls apart. Because we play for joy. We play to be engaged and to be entertained. We don't play merely to kill hours in our day, so we should always be conscious of the parts of our games that are doing just that. It'll help you design better games, and it will help pull you out of a Skinner box or our other game design psychological traps. Or on those rare days where you do just want to make the hours disappear, it'll tell you which games to turn to. See you next week!